You're listening to LA40 with Katerina Cozias, only on LA Talk Radio.
All right, we're here back on another Thursday with LA40. That's right, this is the show where we delve into all things life after 40, because there is life after 40, especially in this world of Los Angeles and Hollywood and ageism that we're all living in. We bring you the show every Thursday to just help remind people in their 40s and 50s that, you know, there is a lot of fun still ahead. And if you're not in your 40s or 50s, if you're younger or if you're older, don't worry, because we always have such great conversations that really it applies to any age. I'm your host, Katerina Cozias, and I love being here. Today we are going to be talking about battling the realities of life. The older we get, the more likely it is that we have delved into some troughs, and those run a wide gamut. I'm really pleased to be joined in studio today by three very special guests, all of whom have their own stories and some of their own advice to share with us on what exactly battling realities of life means and how you can overcome them to really ensure that your life is being lived to its fullest potential. So I'd like to introduce, for those of you watching us on video, you see our three guests. So that is great. For those of you who are listening on audio, don't worry, I'm going to walk you through it. Our first guest to my right, Jason Daley Kennedy. Jason, hi.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited for you for a couple of reasons. Number one, today happens to mark 16 years that you have been sober, no drugs, no alcohol.
Yeah, 16 years. It's without those two things and with a lot of challenges, but still keeping away from them. It's been really a great 16 years.
Addiction is a big reality for a lot of people, and you have moved through that. One of the things you've managed to do is build a website.
Mm-hmm.
You've just launched it last week,
yeah.
And it's all about good news. We're going to tease you with that because we're not going to get into what that is just now. Jason's going to tell us a little bit more. But there is not enough good news in this world, Jason, so I'm so happy to have this now available to all of us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Fantastic. Okay. We're also joined here by Lissa Levin today. Some of you may remember Lissa from an earlier episode. Her story is so impactful, though, that we wanted to invite her back. Lissa is a 20-year television veteran here in Los Angeles. She's worked on some very cool shows, and she'll tell us a little bit more about that. But Lissa is also a 2-time breast cancer survivor. You got breast cancer at 40, Lissa, and then you got breast cancer again at 60. Ouch and wow, right?
That's how I would sum it up.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm really, really excited to find out from you what you did to really, ensure that you have stayed the vibrant, positive person that you are, when not once but twice get hit with really, really impactful news. Breast cancer, any kind of cancer, is always a big ouch. And finally, but certainly not leastly, we have with us Dr. Nina Savelle-Rocklin, who is here to talk to us about something that I think is incredibly important. She's written a book called Food for Thought, which talks about perspectives on eating disorders. Dr. Nina, we're going to start with you because this is something that 30 million Americans deal with, whether it's anorexia, bulimia, some sort of binge eating. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you came to do this sort of work?
Well, yes, and it starts with my own story when I was 5 years old, when I suddenly and randomly decided that my thighs were fat. And I was, my parents were academic college professors. They were not watching TV or reading Glamour magazine. I had no media influences. I just suddenly thought, you know what? If my thighs were thinner, I'd somehow be a better person.
At 5?
At 5. And this began my nightmare into sort of an eating disorder, body image hell. So by the time I was an adolescent, my entire world was about how much I weighed and how much I could lose weight. So if I went hiking with friends, I wasn't thinking, wow, it's such a beautiful day, it's lovely. I was thinking, okay, how many calories am I burning, and am I going to gain weight the next morning or lose it?
Wow.
And every one of my journals was just numbers, what I ate, what I wasn't going to eat, what I weighed, what I was going to weigh. And this continued, and I would starve, I would restrict, I would binge, I would purge. I went through a cycle of every eating disorder there is.
Can you have multiple ones?
Yes.
Oh, really?
It's common for people to cycle through, sort of go from anorexia to binge eating or to bulimia and then back again. It's very common.
For some people that might not be familiar, can you just go through quickly the distinction between those three? I mean, I know there's more than that, but those are sort of the three main.
Yes, those are the three main.
So what's the difference?
Anorexia is when you restrict and you barely eat anything, you sort of embrace hunger. Usually people with anorexia turn away not just from food, but from people, become very withdrawn and isolated and preoccupied with what they weigh. People with bulimia will eat a lot of food, too much, and then purge either by throwing up or by exercising too much. And people with binge eating disorder, which, by the way, binge eating disorder is the most people have binge eating disorder, of all eating disorders, and they don't even realize they have it. They think they've got a problem with willpower. They think they have a problem with food, but no, they have binge eating disorder, and that is when people eat an extreme amount to the point where they're really full and uncomfortable and feel a lot of shame.
But feeling a lot of shame, isn't that, binge eating to me just sounds like a lack of willpower?
It's not, and let me tell you how. No, because it's always symbolic. A lot of people feel empty inside, and they eat to symbolically fill the emptiness. Anorexia can be about, it's not about food. Eating disorders are not about food.
What are they about?
Well, let me actually answer that by finishing my story,
I'm sorry,
because I think it will answer the question. So I finally went to therapy after having an entire lifetime by college. I went to therapy, and I talked to my therapist about everything. I talked to her about guy stuff and school stuff and friend stuff and everything but what was going on with food. I went 3 years, once a week, because I was a very good girl. And I never once told her what was going on with food. She had no idea. But after 3 years, all my eating disorders were gone. And I never once talked about food. And people say, how is that possible? How do you get over an eating disorder, 3 eating disorders, without ever talking about food? And my answer is, it was never about food. The problem was not food. The problem was my relationship to myself. And as I learned to kind of key into what was I thinking and feeling and find a new way to respond to myself,
it just sort of fell away?
It just fell away.
Jeez, that's really interesting because, you think, the thing that I find interesting about eating disorders is there's not really, I can't give you a pill to have you stop it, or I can't, send you to treatment for a few weeks. It just doesn't work that way. 3 years of therapy clearly helped you delve into what your internal issues were.
Right.
What if somebody doesn't have access to therapy, though? How do they... this is such a difficult topic. First of all, 15 years you dealt with this. You see somebody come into your office who's dealing with it for 15 years. Do they tell you that they have an eating disorder, or do they go around it the way you had gone around it?
At this point, people who come to me in my clinical practice know they have an eating disorder. Okay. But people online, because I have an online program called Kick the Diet Habit for dieters, they will say, oh my gosh, I have a problem with willpower. But let me tell you a quick story that I often tell to illustrate how it's not about willpower, which is that a patient of mine came in and she said, Dr. Nina, maybe your other people have problems with emotional eating, but she said, I am a food addict and I can prove it. And I said, well, okay, prove it. And so she said the day before she'd been just chilling out, having a good time at night, and all of a sudden, she's watching TV, all of a sudden Ben & Jerry's was calling her name. She's like, calling my name. I'm a food addict. I'm addicted to Chunky Monkey. I said, well, what were you watching on TV? She's like, my favorite show, Charmed. See, I was happy. Nothing was bothering me. What was the show about? Oh, it's when the devil comes and the sisters start fighting and it gets very ugly and contentious. And then she went, and had her Oprah aha moment. Because at that moment, she realized watching that show had activated her own conflict about her sister. But before it could even become consciously aware, she was consciously aware of it.
She just went to
the ice cream for comfort. If we had focused on ice cream and how out of control she was about ice cream, we never would have gotten to the real problem, which was not only her relationship with her sister, but her inability to cope with painful, difficult thoughts and feelings.
So it's always to try and identify what those are?
Exactly.
But a lot of us have painful, difficult feelings. Not everyone becomes, involved with food. So what is it about food specifically? Is it a control issue?
For some people, it is a control issue. But look, here's the thing. Why food? Well, our first experience of relationship and bonding and connection is the relationship we have when we're being fed as infants. So on some level, deep in our psyche, food represents people, mothering, nurturing, represents people. And if we think about it, we don't think of it consciously, but when we talk about comfort food, we're really talking about wanting to be comforted by another person. And if you think about even the way we talk about both food and relationships, we talk about, hungry for love, satisfying relationships, things like that. So when you understand that really essentially whatever's going on with food has to do with conflicts over people. People can be unreliable, unpredictable, and unavailable. Food's always the same. It's there for you. You can get it when you want. So a lot of times it's about understanding what's getting expressed through the symptom.
If I could jump in,
absolutely.
I love everything that you're saying. It's just like perk. But the thing that about food is like, with alcoholism and drug addiction, we don't need to have alcohol and drug addiction to survive. We don't need to have alcohol and drugs to survive. We need to have food to survive. So there's this whole challenge of that. And I also am a foster father, and I have two kids that are a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old. And the 2-year-old came to us at just over a year, and his relationship with food, you just nailed it. That was how he got love. And so
he's only 2.
we have a 1-year-old and a
Wow.
2-year-old, But you could tell by the time he came to us at 13 months old that he got love through food, and he was able to express love through food, and that was his bonding time. And so he really loved to overeat. And so we've spent a year curbing that behavior with schedules and love in other ways. So it's fascinating.
Wow.
Food is
do you
fascinating.
have 2 little boys or a boy and a girl?
2 little boys,
2 little boys. Dr. Nina, how prevalent is male dissatisfaction with body image? Jumping a little bit ahead, jumping 10 years ahead, let's say, and he's now 12.
It's a lot more prevalent than people think. I hear all the time, people assume that I treat 16-year-old anorexic girls because my practice is eating disorders. Well, guess what? I treat people from their 20s through their 70s, and most of them are older, 40s through 70s, and half of them are men. And they tell me, there's a saying, it's just as hard to be Ken as it is to be Barbie.
Jason, how much of Ken's image did you grow up under?
Well, it's funny.
Because there's some truth to that, right? I mean, we all think of Barbie, but there was Ken, right? The perfect guy, dark-haired, tall, good-looking.
Anatomically correct.
Right, anatomically
Almost
correct.
anatomically correct. There's a big part missing there. But it's funny. I was a kind of a closeted gay kid until I came out at about 22, and my sister had Barbies, but I was like, oh, we should do these. Like, let's play Barbie. Let's do Barbie hot tub. So there was a lot of me like. But there was this image of this tan guy, and I'm, for those of you who are watching or those of you who know me, I'm a pink, meaning I don't get tan, but I spray tan, sprayed by Jade, when I want to. But there was this whole idea of I wanted to look better, and I also had a bad relationship with food as a kid too. I would.
You had a bad relationship with food as well? How?
Absolutely.
What,
well, I believe, I'm an alcoholic, and I believe that. Alcoholism starts, whether it's genetic or not, it started for me from birth. And my first cure for alcoholism was food. I would get these like donuts on a Saturday morning after a grocery store run, and they were just, it fixed it, right? And I...
what do you mean by that? So how old were you?
Probably about 11 or 12 at that time.
Okay, but you weren't an alcoholic yet.
I hadn't started
So
drinking
so
yet.
the
What's
food.
what's the it that it fixed?
Exactly. Well, that's the whole thing. When you talk about the that it fixed was the underlying issues, right? So there's shame. I do believe there's a genetic component of isms, and there's research to support that and research to deny that. That just happens to be my belief. And there was the shame. There was the shame of being gay. There was the shame of being not in the shape that I thought that I needed to be in, of not being the athlete that I wanted to be. And it wasn't instilled in me necessarily from my parents. I can't say that. Yeah, I mean, I actually had really incredible parents who shaped me into the guy that I am today, and all the positive ways. It's in the culture, exactly. I was trying to be anatomically correct Ken, or almost anatomically correct Ken.
Well, it's in advertising.
It-
You can't get away from it.
Away from it today is even harder when you have Insta, right? And,
And Photoshop
oh yeah,
and filters.
and Facetune. Not that I've ever used that.
I was going to say, speaking of filters, how much filtering goes on in someone's brain? And maybe somebody that's not even battling an eating disorder, just somebody that gains and loses 10 pounds, right? Bikini season's coming up, ladies. We all have those few winter pounds we want to lose. We say we're going to go on a diet. And then we yo-yo back and forth. Why do we yo-yo? Why do diets not work?
Diets don't work because diets are ultimately about deprivation, and the anticipation of deprivation only makes you want something more. If you think you cannot have it, then that's what you want. And even more so, diets put the focus on what you're eating instead of what's eating at you. Mm-hmm. And I often find that when people are gaining and losing 10, 20, whatever many pounds, and like I said, all my online stuff is for dieters, it serves a purpose for them to focus on this. Mm-hmm. And I have a magic wand in my office, which I've been told works just very slowly.
Okay.
And what I say is I wave it over people, and I say, well, if you could not think anything about food, weight, body image, anything like that, what would you be worried about? What would be on your mind? And they say things like, well, I'd be thinking that maybe I should leave my husband, or maybe I actually like women and I'm married to a guy. What do I do about that? Or I'd be thinking I hate my kids. So it's a lot easier to think, God, I really shouldn't eat a carb today, than it is to say, I'm really conflicted about something major in my life.
In their lives, is it then that it's just a mask, that they use this as a mask?
It's a distraction. Yeah.
But what
It's
if
a
they really need to diet?
Yeah.
If someone really needs to diet, how do they achieve that without feeling deprived?
By not dieting. I'll tell you, my kids just 6 months ago at Halloween, we went to.
How old are your kids?
This one's 9 years old,
Okay.
and we were at Halloween, and she had the giant pillowcase full of like
Candy.
sugar.
Right. Yeah.
And she's, Mom, I'm hungry. And I said, well, eat some candy. And she said, no, I want real food. And that's what happens when you take away the anticipation of deprivation, and when you figure out what's eating at you instead of focusing on food. And people say, what, you're telling me I could eat whatever I want? I'm just going to eat the kitchen. I'm going to eat Ralph's. What are you saying to me? But inevitably, when they have permission to eat what they want, they get more tuned into their own bodies. And also, just naturally, when you're responding to yourself with comforting words, you don't need comfort food.
Comfort food, the thing that you're talking about too is really mindfulness, and I'm a big meditator, and I think that that's one of the things that really helps me stay present, and it sounds like that's really what your patients are doing too, and your kids are doing, is being mindful.
I was going to say, Jason has some meditation that he does on his website, and I want to talk to you in just a minute, but I want to pipe in with Lissa here, because body image, we're talking about body image, right? How are you affected mentally with your own sense of body image when you're diagnosed with breast cancer and have to get a mastectomy? My God.
It is, I won't say that it is an easy thing, but I think it's very similar to everything everybody is talking about here, that no matter what your body type, you don't define yourself by your body type, and you don't define femininity merely by the more familiar parts that are usually associated with femininity. There are many aspects to that, and so it requires that. But I think for myself and so many survivors that I've spoken with, you're just glad to survive. I mean, your priorities shift dramatically. So even though you still will go, it was nice when I had them, you know, it's a beautiful thing. However, you're just thrilled to survive. And that, you know, and that is your priorities just entirely shift, particularly when you're 39. Because I was diagnosed at 39, and at 39, you would like your body intact.
Right. You're still cute and tight and
So
fit and
exactly,
considered sexy, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's how everyone would have described me then. But
You're looking pretty sexy to me, Lissa.
Exactly.
but you simply go that not only is this not to be, I think with every challenge, and I think from the people you've spoken with, yourself, everyone, every challenge has the potential for bringing you great wisdom and galvanizing you to become a better you. And I mean, it sounds like phenomenally cliche. It does to me as I hear it through my headphones. But I think that it's really true. And so I was fortunate enough in that for me, both times it was caught relatively early. And even though you have a huge sense of your mortality, it is not the profound nightmare it is for some people who are diagnosed for any form of cancer, where you're not thinking about being your better self. You know, you're thinking about being there for your children, your family, your husband, you know, yourself.
How do you become a better self, Jason, when you're addicted to drugs and alcohol? How do you move out of that? Because in Lissa's case, and this is what I find so fascinating about life's realities, right? We have people with eating disorders where you really can't say, take this pill. And yet we have somebody like Lissa who gets cancer where they say, okay, chemotherapy will help you. And then we go to here where it's, how do you get off of addiction, which is so really mental?
Mental, but it's also, I believe it's mental, spiritual, and it's physical.
Meaning?
And so there's three parts to addiction in my experience, and that the mental is the obsession, right? There's an obsession that we have to get that next fix, right? And with food, there's that next fix for me with, sugar. The more sugar I have, the more sugar I need. That's the only one that I feel
You
like
still feel that now?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I think we all feel that.
But that feels to me like that's an addictive substance when it comes to food, whereas there's no real other addictive substance. Would you concur? Or
Caffeine, I say, would maybe be.
Don't
I mean,
take
that's not
caffeine
a
away from
food.
me.
Yeah, me either.
That's
ever.
all I have.
For some people, for some people, they feel addicted, but I say there's a brain and a mind.
Right.
We have minds as well as brains, and people are affected in different ways. And for some people, they can look at sugar in a different way, and for some people, they really can't.
But our
And
society, just to interject, I don't know if any of you saw it. I was driving down La Brea here in Los Angeles the other day, and McDonald's has these new billboards, massive billboard with a Coke. You know, big, shiny, yummy Coke, $1. Like, you know, how society is pushing this crap on us.
Particularly pushing crap on the impoverished communities, and that's what we talk about when we talk about food deserts. And you know, I've been grateful to work with a lot of with a really great anti-poverty organization called Lift, and I'm actually producing an art auction for them next week.
What does Lift do?
Lift lifts families with children under the age of 8 out of poverty, and their proven model. It was started by a woman and. At Yale, when she was at Yale, a bunch of friends when they were at Yale. It's now in Chicago, D.C., New York, and L.A. And we're doing an art auction next week, Lift Art. But the organization is so great because they go in and they mentor families and show them how to get out of poverty, and they're with them every step of the way and telling them what they need to do or giving them handouts. But the problem that we have in our society, one of the problems that we have in relation to food is food deserts, right? And then you know we have.
What do you mean food deserts?
So like if you have an urban area. And we're getting away from this a little bit, but you'll have blocks and blocks and blocks before you'll have any opportunity to get fresh vegetables. It's
and when you do, they're priced out of the market, right?
Yeah,
I had said this before on an episode. You know, you can go to McDonald's and get a whole meal for $4.99, or you can go to the grocery store and buy a little thing like this of blueberries for $5.99. You have a family to feed and you're under the poverty line, you're not going to go to the grocery store and buy organic food.
Buy organic food, let alone buy health insurance now too, which is probably
That's
a whole other episode.
issue.
But like, that this is the thing when we look at, and I've seen some posts on Facebook lately of like, why can't you pay $120? And I'm like, why are you so out of touch with reality? Like, this is the thing. We have so many challenges, and so when we talk about food and we see that giant Coke, I'm right with you. I think it's like there's a mentality that can keep people in this prison, right? And there's actually some new studies that have come out recently about how these prisons started and the racial segregation aspects of it too that have just like recently
It's all been quasi-formulated. Tell us a little bit about your website, the DaleyKennedy.com.
Yeah, the Daley Kennedy is Good News and Conscious Views Daily, and I also say on there, I don't know if I can swear on here, but it's staying.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool.
It's digital.
Yeah, good. Trying to stay unfucked in a somewhat fucked world is basically the gist of it. So it's kind of an irreverent.
It's the point, right?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Right. It's basically
it.
an irreverent approach to Good News and Conscious Views Daily. So we have 4 shows right now. One is called Hollygood, which talks about the good that comes out of Hollywood, and we launched on Monday, so there's a few shows on there right now, a few episodes of each on there. Parent Wrap, which is about the pluses and pitfalls of parenting. So I'd love to sit down with you as a parent to talk about those kind of things, especially around food. We've shot about 10 episodes of that so far. One was about mindful parenting, a lot about control. And then Meditation for Assholes. That was the meditation show that we were talking about as well. And that is the show that is really about getting people who say they can't meditate, much like I did for a number of years, to start. And it's not about levitating. It's about meditating and putting some distance between yourself and asshole you.
The asshole you. I was
right.
say.
It's so. I mean, I love it. It's great because I feel people are responding to it already, and an asshole is an acronym. Like it's
there we go.
Yeah.
For what?
You had to work for that.
Yeah, right. Well, I had a lot of practice being an asshole, so it kind of came naturally. But they're fear, really. It's afraid, selfish, shameful, and shame. Which you talked about shame, and I am a big advocate of shame recovery and meditations that are around that. Hurting or hurtful, so you're hurting or hurting somebody else, and those two things are obviously very linked. Overindulgent, less than, and egotistical. So we just kind of go through different meditations to talk about that. There's a manic button moment for things you can do when you're in the middle of it, and then there's also this thing called the tactometer, which is like helping you regain your composure after you've been an asshole. So, also Good Nightcap, which is good news before you say good night. That's
good news before you say good night. We should all read that because there's too much bad news. Talking about shaming, and I just want to go to Nina again. Somebody comes in and they've been feeling this sense of shame, and Jason's been through that. And what do you prescribe to your patients? Do you prescribe something like meditation, mindful meditation?
Not at first, because they can't be with themselves. So I should explain the difference between guilt and shame.
Okay, I didn't know there was a difference.
Guilt is, I ate that entire pizza. Oh, I feel kind of bad about that. That wasn't a healthy choice. Shame is, I ate that pizza. Oh, there's something deeply wrong with me. There is something very wrong with me. So guilt is about something you've done, and shame is about who you are. And so I have to help people cultivate a kind, compassionate part of themselves to relate, because normally people will say things like, someone just came in and actually she said, I went to this party, and before I went, I was going to have whatever it was it was a really good caterer. I was going to have whatever it was they had, and then I did, and afterwards I left, and I was driving home in my car, and I was like, you have no willpower. You suck. You're never going to lose weight. Now notice how she went from I to you. And the you is harsh and critical and mean. And when you're doing that, you're often turning to food or eating disorder behaviors as a way to get away from your own mean self. And the mean self, to go back to your question, is shaming. And what people need is more of a realistic kind of kind, and it's always there for other people. Like I say, well, what would you have said to a friend who went to a dinner party and she ate too much French food? She would have said, oh, it's okay, it's just, one time, it wasn't bad, but to herself, it's something else. And I also want to make a distinction between overeating and binging. We all overeat. But at times Thanksgiving is about,
I overeat when I go to an Italian restaurant.
Yeah,
So that's my favorite.
We all overeat. But binging or other eating disorders, that's a way of using food to create some kind of psychological shift. And That's the difference. So it's not about sugar or not sugar. It's why are you eating that?
Right. But, you know, you need to make a psychological shift. You needed to make a psychological shift from the diagnosis, which, you know, is always impactful, to becoming aware of how am I going to move through this. How does one make a psychological shift, regardless of what your challenge at the time is? Lissa, what helped you move through these?
You know, for me, I feel really fortunate. It helps to be a comedy writer.
Okay.
It helps to have a sense of humor. I am married to a wonderful man, also a comedy writer. And when I first got the news, the classic, you have breast cancer, he threw me in a car. We cranked up Ethel Merman singing Everything's Coming Up Roses.
Yes.
We drove through every canyon at top speed, just going, is this the best you got? Mm-hmm. And just careening through LA, and went, okay, let's just take care of business. And that's, you know, kind of what we did. So I, you know, urge everyone, if they're fortunate enough to have a sense of humor, to use it. You know, to use it, because there's always a humorous perspective to everything, even when it seems grim, and it helps you, you know, come out of it. That is one. And the other also is to go, particularly when you have a sense of mortality, am I living the life I want to live? If I drop dead tomorrow, would I say I am living the life I want to live? Which was difficult for me because I was living the life I wanted to live. And my husband and I were TV writers, two lovely children, but again, they were 2 and 6, so that puts the fear of God in you. You go, anything goes south here, you know.
It's just that added pressure.
Yeah, so anyway, so there was that aspect, but what I did was, I enjoyed being a comedy writer, but my heart was always in, see Ethel Merman, musical theater.
Okay.
And so I had an overall deal at that time with Sony to develop new half-hour shows. And my assistant came in with the front section of the LA Times. And I was researching pool boys. So
you did like your job.
For fun. Anyway, this was a series. It dealt with pools and a father-son, and the father was a pool builder, digger, but the son was his hot guy. Anyway, so totally different from most sitcoms. Anyway, so, but also on the front page was a feature article about gypsies. And in one gypsy in particular, who was a fortune teller who fought to legalize fortune telling.
Okay.
And because of this woman, that's why we have all these wacky fortune telling.
Oh, this is a true story?
It's a true story, loosely based on a true story.
Wow.
And this is a gypsy who got herself a Jewish attorney from the ACLU. She was arrested by a Mexican cop. I thought it was a great opportunity to talk about the different minorities and the dynamic of that in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And it involved Latin music, which is my other love. And so while I'm developing the Pool Boys story, I'm continually seeing that feature article over there, and I go, I'm writing a musical, and I don't think, had I not been through what I had been through, that I would not have the perspective of, if not now, when.
Huh. If not now, when? So, Jason, back to you. You are a founding member of the committee that's building the AIDS monument.
Yeah.
If not now, when? Play on that a little bit with respect to the AIDS monument, because what Lissa said is true, right? You have to just kind of take it. Yeah, and your perspective changes when you've been through things.
Yeah, you know, for me, I wanted to start this when I had never lost anybody very close to me to AIDS. I was very fortunate. I was also in a generation where it was kind of in the middle, like the 2 generations, 2 to 4 generations above me were gay men were dying all the time, and that's not the only community. I'm sorry, but like a lot of people were dying from AIDS, and that was a death sentence still. And then the generation below me, as I came to find out, had stopped talking about it, and so there had been a spike in HIV infections in the kids who were younger than me, particularly in the gay and Black and Latino communities. because we'd stopped talking about it, we stopped talking about condoms, and there was a cure, quote unquote, is what people had thought. And so I was just fascinated at 32 years old when I was newly single and found that guys that I'd started dating were positive that were younger than me, and I didn't think that happened anymore. And I considered myself very educated at the time, which just goes to show you some of that asshole quality that I was talking about earlier. But
I love this. I have a group called Motherfucker. We'll talk about later.
oh my god, I love that.
I gotta get you all together after the show.
I like to swear.
It's an outlet. that
You know,
we
the
all
title of
need.
your next book. That's right.
Fucking food. So there was a couple of guys that I got together with, and we started talking, and they were working on a project in West Hollywood. The plaques on West Hollywood and Santa Monica Boulevard were in a little bit of disrepair. So this has turned into a 6-year labor. It's a physical space that'll be completed in 2019 in West Hollywood Park with a digital monument component to celebrate the lives of those lost, honor the heroes, and then inform and educate this in future generations. So it's we've been working with some incredible partners, and we have raised a good deal of money, and there's still a good deal of money to raise. But it's really cool. You can check it out at aidsmonument.org. But yeah, if not now, then when? I love that, and there's so many times where I've had experiences where it's like, I need to go back and say, you know what, I changed my life 16 years ago for a reason. And so if I find myself being stagnant and I'm lucky enough to be hit in the head with that stagnancy, then it's a chance for me to say, you know what, I need to start and really live life. And, I so appreciate your journey and sharing that and going through it twice. I mean, like, did you, I have a question.
Sure, yeah.
Did you have a different experience around the second time with the, if not now, then when?
It was a little different the second time. And by the way, just as a sidebar, the assistant who brought me the LA Times article, he died of AIDS.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And so, just was a wonderful human being, but also it was another, if
Wake
not
up
now,
call,
when,
right.
and again, it galvanizes you. Because I was diagnosed at 39, and my mother died of breast cancer at 60. So my feeling was that not only because I beat this, that I wanted to do the things that I felt, were in effect, as they say, living your truth, doing what's really important to you. I also wanted to contribute to the fight against breast cancer. And so through fundraisers, I sat on research studies, etc., and became relatively knowledgeable as a layperson on the disease. So when I was diagnosed again, there was a community. When I was 39, no one had it, and I didn't tell anyone for 11 years because my father had just lost my mother, so I didn't want to panic my father who had a heart condition. I didn't want to become a victim. I didn't want to backlash against me in the entertainment industry because you're a breast cancer
Talking
survivor.
about shame, right?
Yeah,
this feeling of shame.
So it wasn't shame, it was survival.
Self-preservation.
It was
Sure.
really, for me, it was survival. And professional survival as well. But the second time around, I knew what doctors to go to, what hospitals were doing what kind of work.
Because of your research.
Yes. What treatment afterwards was most advisable. Dr. Susan Love, I'm part of her, and very active within her research organization. It's an LA-based organization. They have a run walk May 21st, Pacific Palisades. Anyway,
Sign up.
Sign up, it's great. Anyway, I had the opportunity to contact this researcher to go, okay, I've been diagnosed again, what would you advise other than what I'm considering now? And it was really great because the first thing she said was, shit. And so, which I thought makes us all human. And anyway, so I felt empowered by the knowledge and the experience that I had.
Yeah. So it was an empowerment versus need to live life to the fullest kind of thing.
So, well, I was already doing it. I'd already benefited by that, but I did see it as committing to it even more. And also a huge sense of gratitude because even though I had done everything right from the first diagnosis, ate the right foods, exercise, eliminated stress, all these things, it's a crapshoot, and the sooner you realize that for anything in life, you just, get on with it. So, but the main thing was gratitude, that I was alive to be diagnosed again.
Yeah.
Right. It's your perspective, right? It's shifting your perspective on things, and really trying to run with that. Motherfuckers, because we can't forget about that.
That was a joke.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, I missed that completely.
But now there is one.
but
We
now
have
there
to
is
do
one.
I
it.
thought she was serious.
I
Yeah.
so thought you were serious.
So did I.
I think it has to be a thing now.
All right. Well, 50% of us thought you were serious,
Oh,
Lissa.
that's so great.
Speaking of something serious, and I mean, all of this is, but just back to Dr. Nina for a moment. So you have somebody like Lissa, right, who has this come back a second time. Can someone battle an eating disorder and have it show up again in 10 years?
Yes. And that just means that they didn't really fully resolve it the original time. So people have said to me, I don't understand why this eating disorder is coming back. It's been 10, 15 years. It's very common. But what happens is they get triggered by stress, a stressful situation, and they go back to this way of coping with stress rather than deal with why they're doing it in the first place.
And I was going to say, dealing with stress, back to mindful meditation. Tell us a little bit about what that means. Because I'm sort of in that same boat. I was never spiritual. I was never mindful. I was never meditating. And I find that it's sort of prevalent out here on the West Coast. Do either of you meditate?
No.
No.
Ladies don't meditate. You
will after
meditate.
today, this asshole's going to make you.
I was going to say, motherfucker.
Yeah, that's what it's going to be. The guy that makes us meditate. Yeah, no, there's two things, I mean, so your question is describe how mindfulness helps kind of.
Yes, make you it assists in coping through some of these realities.
I coping through the realities is also, I feel like, and I don't know if this is true in your practice, but for me, I couldn't have gotten sober 16 years ago and then just put it down, and then I had to do something every day. Like it's like a daily thing.
But what do you do every day? What do you mean?
Like there's different things, and I have a kind of a specific program that I work. But like there's something you can't. In my experience, it's not like if I meditate, for example. This is another one. If I meditate today, I'll be good for the next 2 weeks.
Oh wow!
It's something that I have to do, hopefully every day. So that I can actually stay present. Now, I don't do it every day, right? I'm pretty consistent, though, especially, given the fact that I'm facilitating meditations. But the more that I do it and the more I'm consistent in my practice, the better I am at being mindful throughout the day.
The consistency that I would say that my patients have, or people that I treat, is not about food. It's
right.
about their relationship to themselves.
But their relationship to themselves daily.
You have to cultivate that. You have to be aware and remind yourself to be as supportive of yourself as you are of other people.
Right.
There's another great quote. It's not mine. I wish it were. It's if you talk to your friends the way you talk to your body, you'd have no friends left.
Right.
So true.
That's so true. And
But
great.
but if you talk to yourself the way you talk to your friends, you're just going to feel good. And when you feel good, you don't need to cope with whatever.
But we don't do that, though.
That's
and
the
it goes a little
problem.
bit back to that you and I, right? And I think Eckhart Tolle talked about this in The Power of Now.
Yeah.
He recognized that there were these two, a brain and a mind, perhaps, right? Or a soul and a spirit, or mind and a spirit.
The mind and the spirit. I mean, I
Okay.
think those are the two different things, right? And when I treat shame, which I've delved into, as I said, I went through an experience probably about 2.5 years ago, where I just thought I was egotistical, and I realized that behind that was actually the shame, right? And so I did a lot of, the shame research from Brene Brown and read a lot of that, and The Velvet Rage and all of these incredible books. But the one thing that I try to do on a consistent basis is the third chakra meditation. And it can get a little ethereal, but it is also one of the things that's really powerful, and it's just envisioning this light inside your third chakra. And
Which is the third chakra that's core?
it's essentially in your core. So the
Okay.
root chakras, it goes 1, 2, and then 3. Just kind of above your navel, above your belly button. But I mean, the thing is, like, it's a daily thing. Even shame, right? It's like, if I just say to myself, I'm going to talk better to myself. I'm going to talk better to myself. My mother's an English teacher,
Okay.
but I'm going to talk in a more positive manner to myself. And I only say that today. By tomorrow, I'm walking out there. I mean, honestly, by an hour from now, I have to do it a lot.
And
It's a way of life.
But
It's a
it's
way of life,
also
yeah.
important to figure out how you came to speak to yourself in the first place.
Yeah.
Not you specifically, but just whose voice is that?
Mm-hmm.
And where did it
Whose
come
voice
from?
was the 5-year-old inside you that told you your thighs were fat? Where did that come from, right?
Oh,
Did
thank
you ever?
for
Did you ever?
asking.
I was going to say, did you ever resolve that?
That's an important part of the story.
Okay.
Because
I wanna
when I
know.
was training to be a psychoanalyst, I realized the answer to that. Like,
What's the
why?
answer? Yes.
So I told you that my parents were academic, college professors, and I was not a good fit for them. So they
Rambunctious
they
child?
I was rambunctious. But they called it oversensitive. You're too loud. You're too sensitive. You're too this. You're too that. Calm down. You're so dramatic. So the message I got was that I was too much. And in my 5-year-old brain, that too muchness
Was
became
physical.
too much of me. Why it focused on my legs, I'm not sure. I was maybe just looking at them at the time. but that's why.
Wow. What would you tell? I'm going to ask all of you this question. What would you tell yourself now? Your not your 5-year-old self, because that's too young. What would you tell your 20-year-old self before you went in for the 3 years of therapy?
I would say you are not your body. You are a person with a mind and a spirit and a soul and a sensibility and an intelligence, and you are killing that off by focusing on what you fucking weigh. Stop. Be kinder. Don't do that.
You wouldn't tell your friend that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I might.
Sometimes.
I
you know,
might. Sometimes you
hard
just
love.
have to be like,
Sometimes they do.
no, I would say you have to appreciate who you are and not what the scale says. You cannot measure your value on the bathroom scale.
Easier said than done. Wow.
That's
Yes.
very true. I also think, though, I'm blessed with 2 children. When my daughter was little, it was that thing where they would squeeze her thighs, or your cute little thighs, or a constant thing of pretty girl, and the boy is tough boy and man up and all of this, and I just go, I think that it should be cool. My daughter would get all pink clothing, my son would get toys, and I just go, it starts there, and your self-image, particularly for girls, but certainly for both, starts there. And I would say, you have friends with small little girls, give them toys.
Self-image for boys, though, because you're a foster parent. You're raising 2 sons. They're young.
Yeah.
What message do you want to raise them with? This is a tough world, especially this social media world that we're all now living in and under.
Under the social media world, there's one thing I just want to interject. I saw last night. It was about Finsta and Rinsta. Finsta is, and these are kids like 18 to young millennials that are doing Finsta, which are their
What is
fake
Finsta?
Finsta maybe it's
don't
anyway.
even
It's
know
the
what this
fake
is.
Instagram and then the real Instagram. So I think it's Finsta and Rinsta. And the Rinsta is the real Instagram where they have many followers and the pictures are all posed and perfect. But they're doing something called Finsta, which is their fake Instagram, which is like a pseudonym for themselves, and they're putting pictures of themselves without makeup. They're tired. They're slouched over. They'll post multiple pictures at a time. So it's an interesting shift into becoming more of ourselves, even though we're hiding that, right? It's a split persona.
So the fake one is actually the real one, and the real one is actually the fake one.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's mind motherfucker. That's what that one is. But for my kids, I think our foster kids. I two things. I'm trying to instill in them as much as I can while they're with us, and we don't know how long or that may be. And also that because if they don't stay with us, then I want to make sure that they have the tools, no matter what the environment that they're in, to live as full and healthy a life as possible. And I don't know the how to do that. I'm just trying and asking and listening to a lot of friends and experts on that. But
I'd love to have you back to talk about the foster world, because that's something that I think is unfamiliar for a lot of us. Just really quickly, because we're nearing the top of our hour. How could they get taken away from you, or how quickly, how often? Because isn't it better for a child to be placed with a good family and have that stability?
Stability is an important part of it, and it just depends on how much in every foster care case. And by the way, this is Foster Care Awareness Month. There is a campaign. So if you hashtag Foster Care Month or hashtag Foster Care Aware, you'll learn a lot about the foster care system. And I've worked on a couple of recruitment campaigns to get people to become foster parents, people like ourselves in this room to become foster parents or mentors or friends. And you can check out organizations like raiseachild.org or fostermore.org that are really incredible. I will say, though, that to answer your question, there's no somebody said if you write a book on foster care, it would have to be called It Depends. And that just means that, yes, it is best to have them in a safe, healthy environment, but that doesn't mean that their parents can't get that safe, healthy environment. And so the courts and DCFS, who does a really good job, works really hard to make sure that the parents get an opportunity to make sure that their lives are better. And it's just, every case is different, and you never know. And they can last 1 week, and they can last 3 years, and then they could be returned, or they could last 6 years. So, I mean, this is going back to everything that we've talked about, I try to, and I don't do this perfectly, stay positive in this time, no matter what. And I try not to make it about me, right? And the food issues that you guys that we talked about, it was an eye opener for me.
What would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Go to class. Actually, I try to live without regrets. I would say, probably try to get sober a quick second earlier. You could avoid some drama, but yeah.
And you, Lissa?
I think that I just don't know so much about what I would tell myself, but what I would tell 20-year-olds in general, just to say that you've got one body and you've got one mind, and take care of it. Take care of it, because it'll never be better than this, right, but it can stay pretty close to this if you take care of it.
Tell us a little bit about the walk on May 21st, because that's important.
Well, Dr. Susan Love Research Foundation, which is LA-based and one of the few research foundations headed by a researcher, every May, this year, May 21st, has a 5K. So it's 3 miles through beautiful Pacific Palisades.
And this is to raise money for cancer.
And this is to raise money for breast cancer research. And if you had more time, I would tell you all the fabulous things that they're researching. But they are game changers.
Where can people go to read more?
So Dr. Susan Love Research Foundation, and it's called Walk with Love.
There you go, Walk with Love. Speaking of love, Jason, you're giving the world some more love with your Good News site. Tell us where we can find more of you.
Yeah, everything's on thedaileykennedy.com. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at The Daily Kennedy. But if you go to the site, thedaileykennedy.com, there's a new either piece of content or blog or radio show going up every day.
Fantastic. Spell that, because daily is not daily the way you think it's daily.
It's
so
not, but I bought that just in case. So it's the Daley. I'm Jason Daley Kennedy, and it's at the Daley, Daley Kennedy.com.
Perfect. And of course, Dr. Nina, we want to make sure that everyone knows tonight, actually, at Chevalier Books in Larchmont Village, you are going to be having a reading. So for anyone that is watching this that is interested in learning more about Dr. Nina's perspective on eating disorders, hearing it from her, which is really going to be fabulous, Chevalier Books, it's between 7 and 9 p.m. tonight. And you'll be there.
I will be there. I will be reading from my book, a very compelling and a story of transformation, really. Of one of my patients.
And of which your own has been to you. Yeah.
Will there be food?
No. And you can also, I have free giveaways on my site, which is winthedietwar.com. You can get how to get through the night without binging for free.
Very important, as I sat in my bed last night with a bag of Doritos, right? Oh, no.
We'll talk.
We'll talk. All right, and we will talk to you again next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to all of the guests here today for being so willing to share your perspectives on life in general. It's important conversation for us to have, and I thank you for being here. I thank you for being with us, and we'll see you again next week. I'm Katerina here for LA40. See you later.
You're listening to LA40 with Katerina Cozias, only on LA Talk Radio.